All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Jay Lyman. I'm a librarian with Seattle Public Library. I want to welcome you all to this program tonight, and we're going to be talking about website statistics and how to understand how people are using your website. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michael Coffey, who's going to be our presenter today. And so, thank you for being here, Michael.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, hi. My name is Michael Coffey, and I am, let's see, my business is called Ardea Coaching. I help small businesses with their online marketing. And when I get the sharing of the slides here, there we go. Hopefully you can see that. And this is going to be about using data to make better choices. We're not going to go into, we're not going to talk about statistics, like the analysis part of it, really. This is more going to be how to use a tool called Google Analytics to help you understand the behavior of visitors to your website. Okay, so I love having questions. So if you either put them in the chat or and Jay can interrupt me, or you can unmute yourself and ask directly. That's cool. I will just keep going through. I will stop and have breaks every so often for questions. You can look for a little question mark in the lower right corner of your screen for when those are coming up. But yeah, I absolutely want you to ask questions. This is kind of a technical topic. There is some technical stuff, so I have my little old-timey guy here to be a reminder that if you start feeling stress about the technology part, recognize that everything in technology is just a new way of doing an old thing. So if you think about what is the old thing that this technology is trying to do, it makes it more understandable and a little less stressful. You don't really have to understand all of the technology. But for those who do get the technology, I'll have a little bit of that in here. Okay, so we are going to talk about these four things, but they're going to kind of be mixed up. So we're going to be talking about setting up Google Analytics in 3 easy steps. Easy-ish, as easy as I can make them. That's where most of the technology is. We'll talk about navigating and getting through the reports that Google Analytics provides. We will be looking at extracting insights from the data. That's how you actually use it. And a little bit about how does it work, just so that you understand what you're getting. Because a lot of times when you get a report that says a number, you might just believe it. But it's useful to kind of try to dig under the surface a little bit. Okay, so that's what we're doing today. Let us jump into it. Let's set up a Google Analytics account. So the first step is to go to analytics.google.com. Easy enough. Then you log in if you already have a Google-based account. So if you have an account on YouTube, or you have a Gmail account or anything like that, you can use those. If you have a business address, that may be one that you want to use. If you don't have one, you can just create an account. That works fine too. By the way, you can create an account with any email address. So your business email, if it's your business name or something like that, that works just fine. Then it'll ask you to set up your account. And in the world of Google Analytics, an account is you the person, or you the business. But keep in mind that it recognizes that you, whoever you are, may have multiple places where you want to gather information from. So maybe you have 3 websites and 2 apps, and you want to track all 5 things. Okay, that's fine. That's not you. Okay, so you want to make the highest level umbrella for your account. Okay. Then you set up the property. And I have a little arrow here that says now GA4, because we are in a transition. There is an old version of Google Analytics that is still available. And there is a new version that by summertime will be the only version. So the old one is going out, the new one is coming in. But right at this moment in time, we've got both. So I will have a little bit of, this is what old looks like, this is what new looks like. I'm going to try to lean towards the new, but I have some of the old stuff just so that if you see that, you'll be like, oh, that's the old one. Okay, so on this screenshot, you see at the bottom, it says apps and web. That is becoming Google Analytics 4. Okay. And you set up your property. Your property is the website or the app that you are wanting to track. And like I said, you can have multiple properties in your account. Your account is you, the property is the specific place where someone might interact.
And Michael, can I interrupt you just a moment?
Absolutely.
We do have our other Vietnamese interpreter, so we're going to start and restart the interpretation here in a moment.
Oh, okay, great.
So just wanted to let everybody know. And Ozzy, you may have to restart the recording at that point too. You can pause it now if you wanted to. Okay, Ozzy, you good? All right.
Yes.
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay. So if you have gone in and set up your account, that's you or your business, and set up your property, that's your website or your app, then you're done with step 1. This is, it'll ask you some questions when you get it set up, and there are some differences about what those questions are. But it will ask you a little bit about your business when you are doing this setup, like how big it is and so forth, so that it can compare your numbers to other similar businesses to for reasons we'll talk about later. I'll just I'll leave it at that. There are reasons that it's asking those questions. Okay, so you will want to get your measurement ID and the snippet. This is the measurement ID is kind of like your account number. It's not really your account number, it's your property number. but it is the little identifier to say, you know, this data from this website should go into this place, so that you get your data and other people don't. And so you will get a measurement ID, and you will get a snippet, which is a little bit of code that looks like this down below. The measurement ID starts with a G and a hyphen or a dash. So G dash and a number. The old way has a UA dash. That stands for Universal Analytics. But the new one is a G, so you want to look for G dash. That's going to be the new way to do it. Okay, and this code basically is what makes Google Analytics work. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so just grab those two things and make sure you have them somewhere. It'll show you when you log into your account. You can find it there. It's always there. But it has some assistance to get you that information. Okay, and this is kind of a comparison. The tracking ID, that's what they called the measurement ID before. So tracking ID became measurement ID. So there's some terminology differences, but that's not really super important. So if you see those terms, don't be scared. Just recognize they have their special terms for the little number and for the code and the whatever. Okay. Now, step 2 is to add the code to your website. And I have a couple of ways to do this. So you will have to sort of know your own website at this point to know which of these is correct. So this is the first one, first of 3, I think here. And that's for WordPress. We have talked about, if you've done the previous classes in this series, we've talked a lot about WordPress as a way to build your website. And if you are using WordPress, there's 4 here, but SiteKit by Google, Monster Insights, and GA Google Analytics are 3 different plugins for WordPress. So you can go into your plugins section, you can just do a search on Google Analytics, and you can install them. One of them, you only need to install one. They have slightly different features, so look at them. The GA Google Analytics is the most basic. So it is the least complex, but it also has the fewest additional features. So the SiteKit by Google is the most complex, but it was written by Google. So it is the most integrated with all of the bells and whistles. And Monster Insights is kind of in the middle. Okay, so if you have WordPress, search for a plugin for Google Analytics and install one of these. And then all you have to do is go in and put your ID number in there and answer a couple of questions, and then you're ready to go. Second option is you may have another site builder sort of website. And many of those support the new Google Analytics, support the G-ID number. I have on the bottom of the slide here a link to Google's page where they list the most up-to-date version of who supports just plugging in your number. So if you look at this, WordPress does support it. We just talked about that. WooCommerce supports it. Wix supports it. Obviously, Google supports their own their own thing. I think, although I don't really know much about Awesome Motive, I think they have switched over, and Awesome Motive now does support the new G dash number. But you can go to this link and find out if your website builder or website platform supports somehow just, you know, plugging in your ID number and having it work. Okay, so that's the second one. First one was WordPress. Second one was these other site builder platforms. And then the third one, if the previous two don't seem to work, you can do it manually. This is kind of a pain, but you can do it. It depends a little bit on how your site is set up, but every web page on your site has what is called a header. Every page has a header, and sometimes it's its own little block of code by itself that gets added later. Sometimes it's just written in with the page, but all web pages have a header. And if you see up here near the top, there's two brackets that say head. That's the beginning of the header. And then down here at the bottom, right below this little arrow, you have two brackets with /head. That is the bottom of the header. And what you want to do is take the snippet that should have your number already embedded in it, and you want to paste it in right above that /head on every single page. Okay, that's the manual way to do it. It's better if you can, you know, have an automatic way to do it, but if you want to get the code set up, you can do it manually. Okay. Or, you know, ask your neighborhood teen, you know, because technology and, you know, just say, well, I need to insert a code snippet before the head, the close head tag on my, on all the pages of my website. And, you know, half the teenagers out there will be like, oh, that's easy. You know, give me your password and then you get to decide whether that's a good idea. Okay, so, but those are the three main ways of getting your getting Google Analytics onto your website. And then step 3, wait a little for the data to show up. Step 3 is the easiest. But there's a little question mark in the corner. So now is the time for questions. Have I confused anyone yet? Or rather, how can I clarify something that has happened?
Did you already answer while I was getting the interpretation set up, Felix's question about the URL?
I did not see Felix's question.
Okay.
Is the URL what we enter in the property name? It can be. It can be. You can put the URL in the property name because that's the property you're talking about. But you could also like I think for ardeacoaching.com, I believe I have just the words Ardea Coaching website. So that's kind of like the label that you would use, but the URL works just fine. Other questions?
Did we lose anyone on the whole, like, the concept of how this works? Anybody?
Excellent.
Any questions on that?
Yeah, let me sort of tie that all up at a high level. You create your account, which is you. You create a property, which is your website or app or whatever. And then you take the code associated with that property and you add it to your website. There are many ways to do that, but that's the basic thing.
And there's a
Yeah.
question. Did you see that one?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
So Felix is asking, the screens that I saw in my browser were different than the ones that you showed. Yeah, so in this transition period, it's a little bit of a nightmare to try to show what's happening because there's, everything is in transition, everything is changing. It kind of depends on what kind of account you have. And so I'm sort of trying to keep that under control. But there is a, what do they call it? There's like a installation wizard or helper or guide or something like that, that should help you set up the snippet. And if you sort of go into but it the old way just be like your snippet, and that would freak out a lot of people, which I think is why they've sort of moved it into sort of a more automated thing unless you look for it. But know that you can find it there. This time I had to, when I went into mine as preparing for this talk, I was like, well, what's the new one look like? I can't find it. And I had to dig and dig, and I was like, oh, there it is. So it does try to do it automatically for you.
And Michael, just so I kind of understand, check if I'm saying this right.
Sure.
It's almost like the snippets are little, like, almost like listening devices that you're putting out in different places on your site.
Yes.
So you create the account and then create this little, like,
it's like a camera.
Little cameras where you're, so to speak, where you're collecting at those places, and then those connect to your account. Am I hearing that right?
Yes. Yes. And actually we'll go a little bit more into that later, but yes, it's like the snippet is like a little digital security camera. And so you want to install those security cameras on every page so that you can see what's happening there. Okay. Then I'm going to move along. So when you're all set up and you have a little bit of data, you will want to look at your account and look at your data, because that's why you went through all this. And there are two buttons that you should hold on to for dear life, because these are your two lifelines. The home button is up at the top, the Google Analytics home button, and it looks like a little house, and it is up at the top. That will take you to your reports. That will take you to all of your information that you are getting about your website. Down at the bottom on the left is the administration gear. That's you know, like a lot of websites and apps and so forth use a gear for the settings or for administration. So that's a fairly standard image as well. And that's where you get into sort of your account stuff. So if you want to change your settings, or you want to find your snippet, or you want to be reminded of what your account number is, or your property number, that's where you would go. So you can actually see here, this is the admin screen, and I have blocked out the ID number for this particular property. Okay, so if you just click on the admin gear, it'll actually display your G- number. And you can see there's the setup assistant. That's the thing I was trying to think of what it was called. The setup assistant is where it tries to automatically help you. But you've got settings and user management. So like if you were to hire me to help you interpret your data, you could come in here and give me access to just one property. Maybe you have 3 websites, but you only want me to help with one of them. Well, you could go in here and just give me access to the one. There's some data streams, data settings, import. You don't need to touch any of that. But if you want to, here's where it is. Okay. Okay. This is an old screenshot. The new screen is what you just saw. This is the old one. And notice it has 3 columns. We'll talk about that in a second, but whether it's old or new, the first column is about account. And that's where you set up anything, all the settings that are true for everything that you have. So if you hire me for all 3 of your websites and your 2 apps, you could give me access to all of it at this level. And there's some, other options and settings and so forth. Second column is for the property. We talked about that last screen. And the third one is for the view. Now, the old way has views, the new way does not. So I'm not going to talk about views because they're going away in a few months. But if you log in and you see that there is a third column that says view, that means you're on the old system and you probably should think of converting to the new system. Okay, you have months to do it, but like if you log in and you're like, wait a minute, there's 3 columns here, that's an indicator to you that you need to update. Okay. So, summary. Universal analytics is the old way. You set up an account, you set up a property, you add the UA number to your site, and then you create a backup view. Something that's important to do in the old system. The new way, Google Analytics 4, is you set up an account, you set up a property with a data stream. That's what they call your data coming in. And then you add your G- number. That's all. It's a little simpler now. There are other differences, but we'll just leave it at that. So now that we have data coming in, we've got it all set up. We're going to use it. We're going to learn some things about how people are using our website. So before you go into your data, number one piece of advice that will keep you sane. Have a question that you are trying to answer before you open Google Analytics. Because there is so much information in there that you can open Google Analytics and find it is next Tuesday before you close it again. Because there's just so much in there. So if you go in with a very specific question that you want answered about your website, that's going to make a lot of that stuff obviously not what you want. And that makes it easier to ignore and, like zero in on what's really going to be useful for you. Okay. So here are some example questions that you might ask. So how many people are looking at my site right now? Maybe you just launched a promotion, your ad just ran on the radio or whatever. And maybe you want to watch people using your site in real time. Okay, you want to see, like, did I get a little spike of users? Second one, what's the average length of time before a first-time visitor returns to my site? Right? This is a specific question that might be important if one of your goals is getting people to come back again. In a previous class, I talked about testing coupons to see like how effective those were at encouraging people to come back again. And one of the things that we tested was what was the right expiration date? Like how far in the future should we make the coupons expire? And so, making some guesses about when should I make the coupon expire could be informed by the average length of time before that first time user comes back. Right? I want to have the coupon last long enough for those people to use it, but not too much further. Right? I want to, like if it usually takes 2 months for them to come back, I probably don't want the coupon to last for more than 3 months, right? Because I want them to use it, encourage those people that might lag a little bit to hurry up and come back. So that's another way this data can help. Third one, where do most of our visitors come from? Do they type in our website directly? Do they click from some other website and are directed, like a link from another website? Do they come from search engines like Google and Bing and DuckDuckGo? Like where are they coming from? Because that can help you focus your marketing efforts either in the places that are currently working to try to boost those, or if you think that they should be coming from a place and you're not getting that much, that can help you know that, well, what you're doing to encourage that isn't maybe working very well. Okay. From what page do most visitors leave the site? It might be that you've got a leaky tub, right? You might have a web page that like just drops people. There's something about that page that that sucks. And whenever someone goes there, they're like, ooh, close the browser. That's good to know, right? You want to plug that hole and keep the people on your site, right? Sometimes it's something obvious, right? Like it might be the thank you for your order page. Well, yeah, if they have placed their order and gotten to the thank you page, it makes sense that they're leaving your site. That's cool. That means that they're making orders. On the other hand, if it's the welcome to, welcome to my site page, well, then you're not providing what people are expecting. Okay. So that can be useful to improve and tweak your website so that you get the results that you want. And then lastly, what is the average dollar value of visitors who come to our site because of our Facebook ad? Or whatever, right? If you are paying for advertising, you want to be able to see if people are buying because of that ad. And that's another specific question that you can go in and ask. Okay. Now, I will say that I haven't seen any business that had a particularly good result for this last one with Facebook ads. But, there are people that claim that Facebook ads work for them. I just haven't ever seen any of their data. All the people that I have analyzed have been, it's often my first analysis results in suggesting that they stop doing that advertising because they're losing money on placing ads, that the ads are generating sales, but they're not generating enough sales to pay for the ads. So that's a good thing to watch for, because if you can make more money by not advertising, yay, right? That's easier and more money. So, so yeah, just pick a question that you want answered before you open Google Analytics, and that will make your life so much easier. Okay, so once you have your question in mind, look through the menus for what seems like a likely place for that. Most of the menus are named with terms that you can get a basic idea of what you're going to find there. If you want to know what behaviors of specific people or what kinds of people, you want to look at users. You want to look for reports and menu items that say users. If you want to find out where people are coming from, you want to look for things like acquisition or traffic, right? Because that's what you're looking at. You're looking at the website traffic, not specifically the people. However, number 2 here, learn how Google defines the terms you see, because sometimes they're not exactly what you think. So, so yes, the words are useful to help you get into the right neighborhood. But if you're really concerned about very specific things, it's useful to just look up, what does Google mean when they say in Google Analytics, what does whatever mean? What does traffic mean? What does bounce mean? What does, like, look up the term. And, Google wants you to know how to use their products. So a Google search about Google Analytics will get you, pretty good results. And then once you've done that, go back and reassess. Once you've learned what those terms mean, reassess, does that really answer my question, or is it close enough? Right? You may have a question about customer loyalty. Well, Google's never going to be able to tell you the feelings that your visitors have about you, right? That will never show up. But they do have lots of things about frequency of return visits. Is that close enough? Maybe. Right? So you might want to look up, how do they measure that? And where might there be some inaccuracy or some wiggle room or something like that? But, you can find something that's probably pretty close to what you want to know. And then if you're like, yeah, this is good enough, frequency of return visits, that's close enough to that's close enough to loyalty for my purposes. I can use that. That's good enough. Then you can decide and document it. You can say, okay, for my purposes, this particular report is the one that I'm going to use. Write that down somewhere so that you can go back to the same report and be comparing apples to apples rather than apples to goats. Because like I said, there's a lot of information in there, and you want to be zooming in on just the thing you want. So record when you find what you want so that you can get back to it, a month from now when you want to compare. Okay, because you'll forget. We all do. So decide this is the one and document it. Write it down so that you can come back later. Okay, so that's the general process of using Google Analytics. Look through the menus, figure out how Google defines it, assess if that's what you want, and then decide and document. All right. So let's look at some reports. This is your first access to analyzing data. Maybe, maybe you've done this a lot, but there's a lot of sub menus. But notice there's report snapshot. We'll talk about that in a second. Real time means what's happening now. Life cycle is kind of how looking at the big picture of interaction. So acquisition is stuff about how do people arrive for the first time. Engagement is what do they do when they're on the site. Monetization is how are they spending money, or what's the value, those kinds of, money related things. And then users are about the visitors themselves. So there's some demographic information, what technology they're using. I had a couple of years ago, I had a podcast with my best friend, and we had a conversation about I'm a PC Google sort of person, and he's a Apple, Mac, everything sort of person. So we fight all the time. But he was like, well, iTunes is the #1 place for listening to podcasts. And but I went into Google Analytics and I was like, well, of the visitors to our website where we have all of our show notes, something like 90% of our visitors are on a PC. So that was one of those tech questions. I was like, I don't think we should like even if they're all listening on iTunes, we still need to be serving PC users in talking about what we do and technology and so forth, because the people coming to our site and looking at the show notes and so forth, those are predominantly PC people. So the technology section can tell you things like that. It can tell you screen sizes and if they're on mobile or a desktop, those kinds of things. Looking forward, I will say we'll be looking at, like, if we had some kind of internet outage right now, you have the core of the most important stuff so far. From here forward is more refinement, more detail, but you have the core concept here. So if in the next half hour you momentarily feel lost or confused or stressed or anxious or whatever, ignore me. Or ignore that example, or whatever. I'm just going to get a little bit more granular from here. I'm not going to be heaping anything earth-shattering on you. This gives you the basic idea. From here on out, just like, oh, you might look at this, you might consider that, you might. Okay. All right. So I haven't heard a question and I haven't seen one in the chat, so I will continue. Let us look at a report. So a good place to start is up here with, kind of the overview, the report snapshot. And that gives you some basic information. Let me arrange my screen here a little bit. Yeah, I would like to move that, please. Okay. So the report snapshot is, like the first thing on your reports area. Notice here that home is right there, and the report snapshot is on the reports menu item. And notice that we've got some users per minute. This is actually Google's merchandise store. So like if you want a Google sweatshirt or something like that, I took a certification in Google Analytics course or something like that. And one of the things that was part of that course was I get to see the data of probably all Google employees purchasing, like mugs for work or something, but whatever, they're great, example data. Although, like most websites don't have 142 visitors in 30 minutes, like that's a pretty big number. Most small businesses are going to have, maybe just a few, maybe none. But that's an, like you can see the sorts of information you can get at this report snapshot level. Another thing to look at is the date range. The default is the prior 4 weeks. That might be good for you, or maybe you want to see calendar month or last 1 week or whatever, but you can adjust that in that upper right corner. So that you're just looking at the data you want to see time-wise. So your first analysis, the user line, is it going up? Anyone want to give their analysis?
Kinda?
Kind of, yeah. It's kind of spotty. But if you like if you look at the first several points and you look at the last several points, it's higher at the end than it is at the beginning. But it's not like it's steadily climbing. And analyzing website data is often like that, where the specific numbers that you're looking for are not, you shouldn't be looking for like very specific numbers like, oh my goodness, we had 143 people on our website right now a couple of minutes ago, and now it's 141. That's too specific. Are we roughly doing more business now than we were a month ago? Yeah, kinda. We had a little spike. We've had some dips, but it seems to kind of be going up. That's more the level that you want to be paying attention to. Don't get dazzled by, specific numbers. So we need okay. Interlude music there. So what does the snippet look at? As Jay mentioned earlier, the snippet on your website is kind of like a microphone or a security camera or something that is motion sensitive. Okay. What it looks for is an action. So if someone goes to your website and, like they do a search and they see your site in the search results and they click and they go to some page and they read it, and it's not very long, so they don't have to scroll, they don't have to click on anything, they just read, and then they close their browser. There's nothing other than loading the page that Google can see. So you didn't do anything. However, if you scrolled, or if you clicked, or if you played a video, or if you you can set up all kinds of things. Those are actions which the code can then see and say, oh, at this time, we loaded the page at this time, so we know there was a visitor, and this person did this thing at this time and took that action at that time, and it can start putting together a picture of what happened on the page. Okay. So when you're looking at your results, realize that there's some stuff that the snippet can't see. If the person is being fairly passive, fairly, non-interactive, that's hard for Google Analytics to see. But if they're doing clicks and scrolls and whatever, then that is something that that the snippet can see. Just like, like if you if you've ever played red light, green light with an actual security camera, that, like that's kind of what's going on. However, I've got a clock there because the snippet gets bored after 30 minutes. If it has not seen, well, it kind of gets bored. It kind of gets bored at 10 seconds, and then it gets really bored at 30 minutes. So if something hasn't happened in the first 10 seconds or so, it it's like, okay, I don't think this is going to turn into anything. And then if 30 minutes passes and it doesn't observe an action, then it says, yeah, this person probably closed their browser or hit the back button or something, and there was no action in 30 minutes. This visit has ended. It just makes that assumption. Now you can go into the settings and change that. So like if you're Netflix, there's all kinds of time when people are not clicking, right? And so maybe you want to set up, like make that timeout more than 30 minutes. And maybe you want to set events for watched 10% of a video, watched 20% of a video, watched 30% of a video, right? Like, so you can sort of collect data that way. So you can set up events like that, that Google Analytics can see if that works for you. But, for a standard, for most small business websites, that you don't have to do that. Just know that you can. Okay, so what would your data show? This is to test yourself, test your understanding. What would your data show if a person arrived at a page on your website and then hit the back button just a couple minutes later? Second question. Whoop, I have to actually. What if they closed their browser? Oh. There, I saw a question come in. If the analyzed website remains open in a tab, but the user forget about it, yes. Does Google Analytics keep tracking every time the user turns on the computer again? Yeah, that's one of the forgotten browser tab is one of the things that the new Google Analytics 4 is trying to capture. It is trying to understand things like when you open a bunch of tabs and then you don't go back to those tabs until later. It has some ways of tying it. It may not see that as the same visit, but it should be able to recognize that that's the same person. And that's one of the sort of new things that I haven't fully wrapped my head around exactly what the implications are. Like, I know that this behavior would result in this data and that behavior would result in that data. It's still a little bit murky to me on that one, but I do know that the open a tab and come back to it later is one of the big things that they're trying to capture with this new version, because so many people do that. So yeah, I can't give you a specific and or technical answer to that, but they are trying to sort of defragment the data because of those kinds of behaviors. Because previously, the old way, if you open something in a browser and then went back to it, it would be like, I have no idea who you are. This is a completely new visit that just, coincidentally has, technology features that look just like the previous visit from this same person, or, they're trying to merge those together. Okay, so what would your data show if a person arrived and hit the back button? What if they closed their browser? And what if they walked away for an hour? These three questions have a much clearer answer in the old version, and that is, that was called a bounce. A bounce used to be defined as a visit that was made up entirely of loading one page and nothing else. now because it is more, what's our time? Okay, now because it is more, well, they've worked in some AI guesses to kind of knit together some of this information. And so the data that you get isn't pure data. It's pure data with a little bit of AI guessing to fill in the gaps. And because they have shifted to a more event, action related system, it is now a bounce definition has shifted a little bit. It's like that's that 10-second thing. So it's a page load, nothing within 10 seconds, and no eventual other events that it can tie back to that initial page load. So like you opened it in a tab, didn't do anything, but you came back to it, that would take it out of the bounce category. I know that's complicated. That's a little more complicated than I would like, but that's one of those transition things. It used to be a simple thing to talk about. Now it's a little bit more complicated to talk about. Okay, time for questions.
Yes, I want to make sure we covered the questions that we had in the chat. I think we covered the one about the URL and entering the property name.
And the tabs.
Tabs, yep.
I think I see all the chat ones so far.
And Felix, you had a couple of those questions. So if you have questions that weren't answered there, do ask us either out loud or clarify in the chat too.
Okay, well, I'm going to zoom ahead. We are in the final stretch, so here's some practice. Do you want your percent of new visitors to increase or decrease? Lock in your answers. Press your buzzer, whatever, I don't know. Yeah. Wrong.
Oh, this is a trick question.
Yeah, well, probably. Okay, so yeah, it kind of was a trick question, because it depends on your goals. This is another trap that a lot of my clients get into, is that they'll see a thing and they think that the line should be going up, right? Because that's good. The line going up is good. Not necessarily. So let me give you an example. Percent of new visitors going up. Well, if you want return customers, that's bad, right? Because you're getting more and more people coming in the first time and fewer and fewer and fewer people coming back. Percent of new visitors going up is bad if what you want is return visitors. On the other hand, it could be good if what you are doing is an awareness campaign and you're trying to get new people to come to your website. Then percent of new visitors increasing is a good thing. So, sorry to be mean to everyone, but this is a trick question because, I wanted to emphasize that you need to know what you're asking about. You can't just jump in and analyze data without knowing what the goal is, without knowing what question you're trying to answer, without knowing what am I hoping to see, right? You need to define those things for yourself first before you look at the data, because you can always find a line that's going up, right? But that doesn't necessarily help you. What, another interlude? Yes. We're gonna zoom through some of this. Cookies, tracking, and privacy. So one of the other shifts for this new Google Analytics 4 version is they are trying to move away from what are called third-party cookies. And that has to do with people being uncomfortable with being tracked online. And so Google is trying to push the industry in a direction that doesn't require third-party cookies. And unfortunately, third-party cookies have nothing to do with parties or actual cookies. You know, sad, but that's the way. Download your cookies here. No, so cookies are just a little file that the website tells the visitor's browser. So let's say you visit my website. My website says, hey, browser, write this number down. And if I ask for it again, let me know. And then your browser makes a little file and puts whatever the website said in that file. That's a cookie. But that allows me to tell other websites, oh yeah, ask the browser for this cookie, and if it finds it, then you know that that person came from me. Right? And so that's how tracking happens. So if you've ever, logged into Facebook and then gone to a Nordstrom to pick a merchant, and you look at a shirt, and then you go back to Facebook, and now that shirt is being advertised everywhere. Well, that's because Facebook is using cookies to share your information with Nordstrom and vice versa. So Google Analytics 4 is trying to break down that system so that you don't get tracked as much. There will still be tracking, but that's, and that can influence your data as well. What happens with cookies will influence if a website thinks that it's a return visit or not. If you clear out your cookies, that can change the data. So just realize that there's some wiggle room and some uncertainty in the numbers because of this kind of system that happens in the background that you never see. And I mentioned that Google Analytics 4 is using some artificial intelligence, AI, to fill in the gaps. And this is where those questions about what kind of business you are when you set up your account, that helps also, because if they know that you're a small business or a tiny business or a starting business or whatever category you've chosen, it can know that you're probably going to have this kind of traffic, and it can fill in the blanks a little bit more accurately if they know kind of which bucket you should be in. And I'm afraid to know how long ago that movie was. Probably 100 years, isn't it? But for those that don't recognize this is the movie AI, or Artificial Intelligence. So, and that's Jude Law, if you don't recognize him in his robot attire. All right. So I'm just gonna, we just have a few more minutes. I'm gonna zoom through a couple of reports so that you can see what kinds of information are on them. Not gonna go into, what insights you're gonna pull from these or anything like that, because we've kind of gone through doing that as a process up until now. So I just want to kind of show you different reports. So this is a life cycle section report under acquisition. And this is just where did traffic come from. So organic search is like just your regular search engine kind of search. Paid search, oh, there's number 3. Paid search is if you place an ad in a search engine, like those sponsored search results that you sometimes have at the top, that counts as paid search. Direct is if they typed in your website address. Did they click on an email link? Sometimes Google can't tell, so it goes into unassigned. Paid video would be like a YouTube ad. Life cycle, engagement, conversions. A conversion is someone taking an action that you want them to take. It's one of those desired action items. So you can see here some of the things that they have defined as an activity that the snippet can see. There's the first visit. There's adding payment info, right? If someone fills in their payment information, you can set that up as an activity that gets tracked. Begin checkout, right? You could put a little thing on the first page of the checkout. Completed a purchase, scrolled, and you can see how many, of this, like of 80,000 conversions, 30% scrolled on a page where they had scrolling as the desired action. You can look at engagement on pages and screens. So you can see how many people went to various pages on the website, the shopping cart, the men's unisex apparel, Google Merchandise Store. You can see how many people looked at the sale table. Cheapskates. I don't know. Maybe Google cares, maybe they don't. I don't know. New items, right? More people are interested in, well, almost twice as many people are interested in sale items than they are in new items. Oh, that's interesting, right? Number of new users, number of views per user, how long they were on the page, all kinds of information. I have a question mark there. I'm just going to zoom through the rest and take questions at the end. Monetization, that's sales over time, basically. You can see that it pops up a thing that says anomaly detected. There was a spike. The expected number of sales or amount of sales would have been 939, but instead they got 1487, which is an increase above expected of 58%. So it'll pop up things when you have weird numbers. It'll be like, well, wait a minute, we would have, it's doing analysis in the background of your numbers. This is a chart of how many times people added something to their cart compared with how many views that thing got. Demographics has no gender data there, probably because they know that this website is mostly their employees, and if it says 90% male, then they would have to admit that they have a problem. But you can see here that most of their users come from the US. Second, India. Third, Canada. Okay. Top city is New York. Second is Mountain View, which is where Google is based. So that makes sense that Mountain View would be up there. I mentioned user technology. This is 100% web visits, which makes sense because this is a website. But if you had an app, that might not look quite the same. Here's some more. You can see browser use. Most people are using Chrome. Few people are using Safari. Most people are coming from a desktop, but there's still a significant number of mobile users. Some tablet. Screen resolution. How big is the screen that people are using? Which can help you understand, like how should the page be laid out? This is the old version of this report, but it's easier to see, in my opinion, than the new one. This kind of shows the flow from one page to the next. The left side is the old one. The new one is kind of, is not as clear to me, but the old versus the new version of path exploration. And you can configure new things. I'm not going to do advanced stuff. Image credits. Thank you. Any questions? I'm going to leave the screen share up just for a bit in case someone has a question that I can go back to a slide, but
Thank you. Why don't we turn the recording off just
Yeah.
in case there's anyone that would like to ask a question not on camera. So we'll say goodbye to the audience that's watching this after the fact. Thank you for being here, and we hope you'll join us.
Bye, video audience.
Bye, video audience. But those of you that are here now, you're welcome to stick around. And we can answer questions there too.